Welcome back to Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. Tonight we continue this journey and learn the next step necessary to live an unchained life. But first, we want to make sure that everybody's registered. Please go to the website on your screen, go to unchainedevent.org/Bryant/register. Everybody's information is completely confidential and will only be used during this series and to inform you of future events. Once you've registered, you will receive an email or text each day reminding you of that evening's presentation. With that daily reminder, you will also receive a link before that evening's presentation. Click on that link and you will be entered in our nightly giveaway. So if you have already registered, you should have received a link today. Make sure you click on that link to be entered into tonight's giveaway. You only have to register once, but to be entered in tonight's drawing, make sure you click on the link. Each night we'll be giving away a signed copy of our speaker, Richie Halversen's book, The Darkness Will Not Overcome. But you do have to click on the link in order to be entered. This lets us know who's joining us on this particular night. So if you've not registered yet, make sure you do so right now at the link on your screen, unchainedevent.org/Bryant/register. Now, last night we had people join us from all over, and we would love to hear from where you are joining us from again tonight. Please write wherever you're joining us from in the comments section of this live stream. We want to hear from you. Now, whether you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook, please make sure that you hit the like and share button. Everybody struggles with addiction on some level, and we all know someone who either struggles with addiction or we know someone who struggles with addiction. So please help us get this message out. Tonight, Pete O'Connor is joining us to share his story of how he became unchained. We will also have a Q&A with him after Richie's message tonight, where you will be able to ask Pete questions regarding his story. So be thinking of some good questions to ask him and write them in the comments section of this live stream. Pete, it's so good you could be here with us this evening and be a little bit vulnerable, share your story with us and what you've been through and your journey that's taken you there. Tell us a little bit about yourself, something about your life before you got into your addiction.
Right now, I'm actually working for Wildwood Health Institution. I'm a cook there, so I get to cook for our lifestyle guests that are, facing any type of health crisis that they're going through, whether type 2 diabetes or cancer. And so it's a real pleasure to work and to cook food for them, because I never knew that I could cook. So it's a real blessing. And I've been there for about close to 3 years now. So.
All right, how about before your addiction? Tell us something about that.
Before my addiction, okay. Before that, I actually spent 20 years in the military. But before even that, I was living in California at the time during my childhood years. Living with the Christian family, of course. And at that time, I grew up with two brothers, two sisters, and I grew up in a public school, of course. And my graduation class was about 5,000 people, so
wow.
that could imagine how big that school is. Sometimes people would think it's a college, and it looks like almost a college because it's so huge. And at that time, growing up in a Christian family, my family decided to take a vacation to go visit my cousin in Georgia. And I remember growing up, they came back from their vacation and said, we have a family get together, and said we need to sit down and we need to talk and we just want to say something. So we're like, okay, what's our parents going to say? And they basically sat us down and said, we're moving to Georgia. And we were kind of shocked. I was in shock, actually, because I wasn't ready to move. I was already settled where I was at. I had lots of friends. And from living in a city, and they told us where we were going to live, 10 acres of land, very small town, country living. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a new life. But I'm kind of glad that my parents moved there, because living in a city, it has a fast lifestyle. You don't really get to slow down in life. And with country living, you actually slow down in life and you actually have more time with your teachers. You're able to learn more, I think, where in a bigger school, they have so many students that it's really hard to spend time with each student that has a struggle, whatever subject it is.
Okay. So you came here to Georgia. Tell us a little bit about where your addiction all began.
And actually, my addiction started was back in California. I grew up in a Christian family, of course, but we weren't your typical Christian. I mean, if you looked at us, we looked like everyone else in the secular world. But in church, we looked fine. Whenever we had family get-togethers, birthday parties, my cousins would always have alcohol, and I don't think they were Christians. Some of them were, but I know there was always alcohol there. And I remember my first taste of alcohol was at age 12 years old, and my cousin gave it to me and says, "Just try it, you'll be okay." And so when I first got that first taste, I was like, "Ooh, wow, this is really good." And of course, at that age, 12 years old, you can't drink alcohol. And so during my adult life, when we moved to Georgia, and actually when I joined the military and graduated from high school, that's when I started going downhill from there, because the influence, especially being in the military, drinking at a younger age. And then when I turned 21, I was, going to bars every weekend, even during the week. So, and at that time, I didn't really think I had an addiction, because I was going to bars, drinking, and doing the same thing what all my friends were doing. Mm-hmm. And in reality, there is a high percentage rate in the military that people are alcoholics, and they don't even know that. And that's where it actually started, was during my military career. I started, declining, drinking more heavily, going to bars almost every Friday and Saturday night, sometimes, during the week. And one thing led to another, especially mixed drinks, especially using, energy drinks, mixing with different types of alcohol. And that's what caused my life to have some health situation, to where I was having some health issues, heart palpitation because of mixing alcohol and energy drink. I mean, just imagine that. I mean, one can of Red Bull is probably, probably 4 cups of coffee, so imagine drinking 2 or 3, on Fridays and Saturday nights. So that doesn't really, you're actually abusing your body. At that early age, at your early 20s, you don't realize you're just like, it's not gonna, hurt me. I got plenty of time. And
so while you're going through this addiction, what were some of the negative emotions and feelings that you were experiencing?
One of the 3 things that I was experiencing was anger issues, jealousy, and pride. Those were the 3 things that I noticed that it started increasing, especially when I got married. And out of all places, I met my wife at a bar.
Oh, wow.
So, and we know what alcohol does to you. It doesn't help you think clearly. Your rational thinking is not there anymore. It's gone. But you think you have full control. In reality, you don't. There would be times where I would get in fights at the bar due to jealousy or pride, or just the way people look at you, or because I used to be in a motorcycle club, and drinking almost every weekend. It didn't really do anything for me, but built anger issue, jealousy, and pride again, and it started declining. It started going down more, I started going down and down, down. And next thing you know, you don't even realize until you hit rock bottom. And you don't realize that you're addicted to something. And I thought I was handling my drinking problem, just like everyone else was, until you get sick. So when I was in my early 30s is when I got sick. I had panic attacks, anxiety, a heart palpitation. And so every time I had panic and anxiety attacks, I would go to the ER. And to be honest with you, if I wasn't in the military, my medical bill would have been, really high. And that's from the from the drinking, from the energy drinks. And actually I was a smoker too. So for so many years, I started smoking probably at age 19. And I didn't quit till probably like 34,
And so what happened that you started making a change in your life and started to work towards recovery?
One thing that really helped me was when I got sick, when I started having those panic and anxiety attacks. Now when I say panic attacks, it literally feels like you're having a heart attack every time it happened. And it's a scary thought and a scary feeling because there's nothing you can do. When it happens, it just happens. I could be talking to you and I'll have a panic attack and I can't control it. So I would go to the ER and somehow they gave me some medicine or something that would ease me. So one day I was at work and I was just watching this YouTube video. I don't know if it was God, showing me, but I watched this woman. She just said, change your diet. So I went from what my eyes could see was my diet, was what I ate, to become a plant-based diet. So that really helped me a lot. And this was during my military career, of course. And within 3 to 4 months, I saw a change. I had less panic attacks. I had less anxiety. And at that time, I had already left the church, of course. Didn't want to do anything with God. Didn't care about who God was. And of course, my sickness was what drew me closer to God, because at that time, when I started healing is when I started getting more conviction from the Holy Spirit of my lifestyle, and Him calling me back to Him. And so that really helped me a lot is when I changed my diet. And it wasn't easy a transition, of course.
What were some of the things you did in order to become reconnected with God and your relationship with Him?
When I came back to the Lord was in 2019, and actually what really helped me a lot was when the pandemic happened.
Oh, wow.
I was able to spend time reading His Word. Since our church closed, we weren't able to do church in person, so we were doing church online. But online didn't really have a really good connection with me because, I needed that connection with people. I'm a people person, I got to hug you or shake your hand. But with that transition,
that was a little difficult at that time.
Yes, yeah, you can't do that at that time when you have to be 6 feet from each other and wearing a mask and all that kind of fun stuff. But I started reading the Bible, and then I started a ministry online on YouTube. And when I started reading the Bible, I started getting more and more connected with God and who God was, and that He really wanted me to be saved. He did not want anyone to perish. When I read that verse that He's willing for everyone to be saved as long as we give Him a chance, and it's so true. As long as you give God a chance and let Him into your life, He is there for you. He's not going to give up on you. It's us that we give up on Him.
And so has He played a role in your recovery process?
Oh yeah, 1,000%. I owe everything to God. I mean, without Him, there's a verse says, without me, you can do nothing, right? And it is so true because when you try to do things on your own strength, you can't do it. There's no way. I mean, if you say that you can, there's no way. If I went to a bar at that time without God, thinking that I could, I would go right back to it. You know, because especially your friends, you know, I had to change on who I hang out with, you know, because people have a huge influence in your life. And all of my friends, all they did was smoke, drink, and go to bars. And that wasn't my lifestyle anymore. So I had to change my lifestyle to a new one and get new friends. And my new friends were my church members, you know, because they encourage you, they lift you up, they pray with you, especially the pastor, and that really helps you a lot.
You had a good support system.
I really had a really good support system during my conversion, I would say, to an extent, because they didn't really know, you know, how bad it was or what I was going through. But all I can say is prayer is the key thing. My mom and my church family prayed for me for 15 plus years to come back to the Lord.
Nice.
And that really helped me a lot. Prayer is the number one thing. If you have any family members that are struggling with any addiction or anything, pray for them, because prayer is the key, because God will answer the prayer. Because He answered my mom's prayer and all my church members' prayer, that, you know, because I wouldn't be here giving this testimony or this interview, you know.
Yeah. So how long have you been free now?
Oh man, so during my transition, I would have to say 2018 is when the last time I started drinking and smoking. So it's been over 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
So it feels like it was yesterday, but I feel great. I could taste my food better. I could smell better.
That's
you know,
awesome.
I could smell a smoker definitely from far away. And I don't have any anger issue, pride or jealousy. I mean, it's still there because, you know, the devil will tempt you, you know. He'll send the right people just to irritate and agitate you. Try to push your buttons, even your church members. But God is always there for you as long as you continue to pray. Like Paul says, pray without ceasing. And if you understand what that verse means, you know, you pray during the time that you are going through that struggle, whenever those buttons are pushed.
Yeah.
And you just ask God for strength.
So if you could tell our audience this evening one more thing that you feel might help them on their journey of becoming free, what would you tell them?
Sure. You know, the one thing that I would say is God is the key to everything. If God wasn't in my life, I wouldn't be here. I don't think I'd even be alive, because there was a lot of things that I have done that I'm not very proud of. God was the one that helped me with my transition to become who I am. You know, like 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And God is knocking at the door. He wants everyone to be saved. There's not one soul that He doesn't want to see perish. And what I want to say to everyone that's watching this is give God a chance. You know, He's there for you. He loves you more than anyone in this world. I know that's really hard to comprehend, but just give Him a chance, and I promise you, everything will work out, and He will help you get through whatever addiction or struggles that you are going to go through. And He'll give you this strength.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Pete. Really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Yes, it's been a blessed time. And thank
you
you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Don't forget to write your questions for Pete in the comment section of this video. As soon as Richie concludes his message for us today, we will be back for Pete to answer some of those questions. And at this time, Richie Halversen is going to share with us the next breakthrough we need to begin living an unchained life.
Welcome to Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. My name is Richie Halversen. For years I struggled with addiction to opioids. But when I became willing to do something different and I surrendered to a new way of life, man, I started seeing those chains begin to fall off. And the thing about addiction is over time, the burden and the guilt and the shame begin to pile up. You hurt a lot of people when you're in active addiction. And a lot of people are hurt by addicts. And often addicts are hurt people. And the people that they're often hardest on is themselves. One of the important breakthroughs that we have to experience is forgiveness. We have to forgive ourselves, we have to forgive others, and we have to allow ourselves to be forgiven. In 2 Corinthians 5:18 through 20, it says, God who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. You see, to live an unchained life in a messed up world where people do some crazy stuff, we're going to have to learn how to forgive. Real forgiveness is something called reconciliation. It's not just saying I'm sorry. Reconciliation is basically restoring a relationship to its original condition before the pain and the betrayal happened. Saying you forgive someone but making their life miserable, that's not forgiveness. Saying you forgive someone but constantly reminding them of their mistake, that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it's absolutely necessary if you're going to live an unchained life. If you're going to be freed from the past that's holding you back. Of all the 12 steps that I hear people talk about, even if they've never been through recovery, is steps 8 and 9. I believe that's because those are the ones that are dealing with reconciliation. Those are the ones that are dealing with forgiveness. They are probably the most intimidating. So step 8 is making a list of all persons we had harmed, and we became willing to make amends to them all. And then step 9 is make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. I always thought making amends was saying sorry until I worked this step and discovered this word, reconciliation. Real amends is working to restore the relationship. Real amends means stopping the behavior that keeps causing me to have to say, I'm sorry. In fact, sorry without change makes it worse. If I keep saying I'm sorry for a behavior, but I don't discontinue that behavior, that makes it worse. My wife got so sick of hearing me say, I'm sorry I stole from her. I'm sorry I got high. I'm sorry I was late to pick up the kids. I'm sorry I didn't even come close to picking up the kids. I'm sorry. Until one day she got so sick of it, she looked at me and she said, yeah, you got that part right. You are sorry, Richie. You see, real amends requires change. Change is hard. But friends, nothing is more freeing than real forgiveness, reconciliation. Man, when I think of forgiveness, there's this person in the Bible that immediately comes to my mind. His name was Joseph. Okay, so his brothers, they beat him up, they throw him in a pit, they sell him into slavery falsely. And then after he goes to slavery, he gets purchased, and the guy he's working for, his wife comes on to Joseph. He gets falsely accused. Then he gets thrown into prison unjustly. Man, the guy can't catch a break. While in prison, he interprets the dream of the royal cupbearer. He tells him, hey, in 3 days, you're getting out of here. But could you just do me one favor? In Genesis 40:14, he says, mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place. But notice, verse 23 says, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Joseph remains in prison for 2 more years. Now, I want to be honest. The cupbearer was lucky that Joseph wasn't me. Because if and when I got promoted to vice pharaoh, first order of business, bring in the royal cupbearer. But this is the thing, revenge sounds good at first, but revenge will ruin you in the end. It may have an immediate feeling, a rush of endorphins and feel good, but friends, the price and the chain is far too heavy of a burden to bear. When you look at Joseph's life, most of his pain came from one place, his family. You do know the hardest people to forgive are people in your family. And that's because you can't ignore the people you live with. It's easy to forgive someone you don't see much. In fact, I would suggest we don't really forgive them, we just forget them, right? It's easy to forgive people that we don't see very much, but the person that you got to work with and live with and raise kids with and, man, you got to sleep next to, that is hard. Joseph didn't deserve everything that happened to him. Everything that happened to him wasn't right. Nothing was justified that the brothers did. But when you're following this story, it does seem like Joseph might have been a little bit hard to live with. Okay? He seemed to have been a little bit of a tattletale. He seemed to be a little spoiled. You know, his father loved him. You know, he got a special coat. None of the other brothers got a special coat. He seemed a bit of a show-off. I think he was probably a little annoying. Hey, guys, I had another dream last night. Who cares, Joseph? But according to Genesis 37, Joseph's brothers hated him. No matter how annoying Joseph was, he didn't deserve the hate. It says that they couldn't say anything nice about him. They were jealous of him. Let me tell you, jealousy, hate, and anger, those chains will kill you and burden you and crush you as fast as any drug. These brothers are going to discover that the short-term satisfaction of getting even isn't worth the long-term price that you have to pay. While Joseph was in prison, think about that, 13 years in prison for what his brothers did. With every bowl of prison food that he had to eat, every beating from a prison guard he had to get, every second, minute, hour, day, year lost, Joseph was reminded of what his brothers did to him. But as you study this, something jumped out at me as I was reading this story. You keep running into this same phrase. In Genesis 39:2, it says that the Lord was with Joseph. When Joseph was in Potiphar's home, the Lord was with Joseph. When Joseph was in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. In Pharaoh's court, the Lord was with Joseph. No matter where you are right now, God is with you. And so instead of wasting time planning his revenge, Joseph spends his time getting to know God and heal. Instead of staying in the problem of what happened to him, Joseph gets into the solution. You see, revenge only hurts. Resentments only hold us back. They do not help the pain that you've experienced in life. Instead of letting the pain make him bitter, Joseph let pain make him better. Man, I experienced a lot of pain in active addiction. I lost a lot of stuff, and I almost lost my family, and I almost lost my life. I went through a lot of pain. And so I'm going to allow that pain. Instead of being kept prison in that pain, I want to experience freedom from that pain. I'm going to use that pain in order to push me forward. You see, Joseph let the pain make him better. We're not responsible for everything that happens to us. Some of us may have had some very terrible things that were done to us. And you know what? We're not responsible for everything that happened to us. But we are responsible for the way that we respond to what happens to us. The first time I ever worked step 8 and 9 in recovery, man, I had a massive list. I had to make a list of all the people that I had harmed in my active addiction. People I stole from, people I lied to, people I endangered, people I hurt. The people you love the most, you usually hurt the most. But like Joseph, I knew that I wasn't alone. You see, just as God was with Joseph, God was with me. God put people in my life that were healthy, that were going places where I wanted to go. I had a sponsor who had gone through what I had gone through, who had made amends, who had reconciled his relationships, who was there to help me. They say the steps are in order for a reason. There are people who want to jump over step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and go all the way to 8 and 9 and start making amends. Don't do that. They're in order for a reason. Each principle builds on the next and prepares you for the next one. And so it was helpful to have a sponsor who reminded me of this process of reconciliation. He reminded me not to put expectations on these amends. He said, Richie, look, don't go into this amends expecting them to take it a certain way. Don't expect them to receive your amends and receive you back in open arms. He reminded me that I wasn't responsible for their reaction, but my action. I'm not responsible for anybody else, just my action. And so I started making these amends. And you know what? I went up to some people and they were angry. I went up to some people, man, they said, I don't ever want to see you again. I went up to other people and they were upset. They were sad. They were hurt. How could you do this to me? But you know what? I went to other people and they were happy. But you know what? Regardless of how it was received, my burden was lifting, which with each amends I made, with every reconciliation, my chains started breaking. In the Lord's Prayer that Jesus teaches the disciples, it's interesting because it says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Notice it doesn't say before or after. It says as. As we forgive, so we are forgiven. Only when we forgive do we start feeling forgiven. In Matthew 6:14 through 15, it says, if you forgive others, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive you. Now, I don't believe this is saying that God's up in heaven keeping track and he's saying, okay, they finally forgave his sin. Now I'll forgive one of his sins. Okay, 2 sins, now 2 sins. No, I don't believe that's what it's saying. What it's saying is only when we receive God's forgiveness can we adequately ever give forgiveness. Matthew 18:35 says we have to forgive from the heart. Matthew 12:34 says out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. The reason some of us can't ever forgive is we've never allowed ourselves to be forgiven. We have no forgiveness to give. You know, our hearts are, there's no room for forgiveness in our hearts. And the problem is you can't give out of a deficit. And so before you can ever give forgiveness, we've got to receive forgiveness. And as I was making those amends, man, I started feeling free, regardless of the way it was received, regardless of whether someone accepted or not. It was about me doing the right thing. It was about me breaking the chain of shame, breaking the chain of guilt, breaking those chains. But the person that I had at the very top of my amends list was myself. I had to learn to forgive myself. It's a process that doesn't happen overnight. But let me tell you, freedom comes with forgiveness. When we get to the end of this story, Joseph's brothers show up. It's kind of interesting. The tables have turned. It's a drought going on, and Joseph's brothers show up. They need his help now. They don't recognize him, but boy, Joseph recognizes them. They're the brothers that beat him up and threw him away. And throughout this encounter, Joseph has to keep excusing himself in order to hide his weakness. Because you guys, real forgiveness is hard. It's not easy. Real forgiveness is it's a mini death. It's not easy. And so Joseph tests his brothers to see if he can really trust them. You see, forgiveness is not being a punching bag. Forgiveness doesn't mean you just excuse bad behavior. Forgiveness is not enabling someone to continue. That's not forgiveness. No, Joseph tests his brothers to see if he can trust them. People will be clean for 5 days and they'll come up to me and say, yeah, my wife still doesn't trust me. My mom still doesn't trust me. My dad doesn't trust me. You've been clean for 5 days. And look, that's great, but it's going to take more than 5 days. You know? That's great. You haven't lost your temper in 10 days, but you've been losing your temper for 20 years. It's going to take some time for them to trust you. You used for years. Maybe you lied for years. Maybe you had an affair for years. Maybe you've been a jerk for years, right? A trust violated for years doesn't heal overnight. Trust is going to take time to reestablish. It took time for my wife to trust me again. It took time for my wife to be open to opening her heart to receive me again. You see, for reconciliation to happen between Joseph and his brothers, trust has to be reestablished. And trust can only be reestablished through time. Not I'm sorry, but time. Joseph pretends like he's going to put the youngest brother, Benjamin, in prison. He is the last son of Jacob's late wife. But in almost the exact opposite way, instead of doing to Benjamin what they did to Joseph, these brothers beg to take Benjamin's place. Instead of allowing him to go into prison as they had done with Joseph, they asked to go in his place. You see, friends, this is the key. Joseph is not the only one who's been in a prison. In fact, his brothers have been in a prison, a mental prison, a physical prison, much longer than Joseph has. I've discovered that my mental prisons were far worse than any jails or institutions or prisons that I ever went to in my active addiction. These brothers need to be set free. They need the freedom of forgiveness and reconciliation. In Genesis 45, 1 through 2, notice what it says. Then Joseph could not control himself. Before all those who stood by him, he cried. He wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard him, and the household of the Pharaoh heard him. You see, friends, forgiveness hurts, but it's where the healing can begin. It's where the tears can happen, and it's where you finally feel this weight lifted. Genesis 50:20. Notice what Joseph says. He says, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about, as it is this day, to save many people." In Romans 8:28, it says, "For those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose." This is probably one of the most misquoted scriptures. This doesn't mean that everything that happens is from God, because not everything that happens in life comes from God. This doesn't mean that everything that happens in life is good. What it's saying is that everything that happens, even bad things, God can bring something good out of it. Just look at the life of Joseph. In fact, nowhere do we see this reality more than in the cross of Jesus Christ. In Romans 5:7, it says, "One will scarcely die for a righteous person." It's hard enough to forgive and take a bullet for someone we love, let alone someone we hate. And yet we read in Romans, God showed his love for us in that while we were sinners, now in the Greek, it's enemies. While we were enemies, Christ died for us. I like the way the Message paraphrase puts it. God put his love on the line for us by offering his son in sacrificial death while we were of no use whatever to him. You see, often we forgive people because we still have use for them. We live with them, we work with them. You know what? I'll enjoy life better if I just kind of forgive them or say I forgive them. But if we only forgive someone to get something out of it, it's not real forgiveness. It's a transaction. According to Romans 5:8, God forgave us when we were only a liability, when we brought nothing to the table. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. But friends, when you are really hurt, when you really have reason to be upset, when you have a reason to resent, but instead of taking it out on them, you absorb the pain and you forgive them and restore the relationship to where it was before you hurt, that's where real healing can begin. That's where real freedom is. On the cross, Jesus forgives his executioners. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And like Joseph, Jesus was abandoned and betrayed by 12 brothers, his disciples. Judas and Peter usually take all the blame, but Mark 14:50 says they all forsook him and fled. But the good news, and it's the core of living an unchained life, is that Jesus, instead of retaliating or repaying, Jesus started reconciling. Like Joseph, Jesus ends up at the right hand of power. And instead of using his power to condemn his betrayers, he uses his power to save his betrayers. Instead of giving me what I deserve, Christ took my shame to the cross and he killed it to set me free. C.S. Lewis said, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. When the world did its worst, God gave His very best. Let His perfect forgiveness free you right now. All of us need to feel the chain of forgiveness break. Let it break that chain of guilt and shame and hurt and pain right now. Give it to God. Let Him set you free.
Thank you for the message, Richie. It is now time for our Q&A, and I'm here again with our guest, Pete O'Connor, and he is ready to answer some of your questions. If you have not posted your question yet, please do so in the chat right now. So Pete, we have a couple questions here for you that came in from our audience.
Sure.
One person said, sounds like the same problems I had. I had panic attacks. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. How long did you have panic attacks? Panic attacks are a scary thing.
Yeah, it is. It's no joke, actually. I would say during that time, I probably had it for at least a couple of years. But during my panic attack, it sometimes would last between 5 to 10 minutes.
Wow.
And there was nothing you could do but try to think of something. I would sometimes call my parents. I would sometimes try to talk to a friend. But most of the time, it really doesn't help. If I would have had God, I think God would have helped me to get through that panic attack, because mine was an extreme. I would say extreme, because it, like what that person was stating, it does feel like you are having a heart attack, and it is a scary moment, because when your chest and your heart starts beating, it feels like your heart wants to come out of your body, and there's nothing you could do but just try to stay calm as best as you can.
Another question is, what are those little things or blessings that you value and acknowledge now that you are free, but you were missing over your years of slavery?
I would say one thing for now is the sense of smell came back to me. As I was a smoker, you don't realize you lose some of that sense of smelling. And when I quit that addiction of cigarette smoking, I could realize, I'm like, wow, I could actually smell a lot more things. And I could actually smell smokers too, from as soon as they walk into the door. And then you realize, wow, that's how I used to smell, because the cigarette fume stays in your clothes, in your pores, and in your body, and you don't realize you actually stink.
It probably improved your sense of taste too.
Oh yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention was
related.
was my taste. My taste bud definitely has really changed. It has really improved where I could taste food now, to where at the time, I mean, you could still taste it, but not as much, and so that really helped me a lot. So I just thank the Lord for that, that I'm able to have those ability back,
Yes.
especially the smell, and my taste bud, because we all like to eat.
Yeah.
So.
I have one more question for you. It says, thanks so much for sharing your testimony. How did you leave your old friends that kept you in your addiction and find new friends to help you with your recovery?
Wow, okay. For me, it was, even though, when I was transitioning to become a Christian, I still had friends, calling me, wanting to hang out. But I know deep down that if I went and hung out with them, I would go right back to what I was doing. So what really helped me was being active in our church, especially with the youth. Our pastor was a young pastor. And so we had a lot of events, evangelism, feeding the homeless, going out to your neighbors, get to know who they are, giving them literature, Bible studies. And that's how you start building relationships, making new friends. So that's what really helped me a lot was my church family and my pastor.
Thank you so much again, Pete, for joining us here and being willing to be vulnerable and share your story.
Yes, thank you again.
Yes. Now let's see who our winner is for tonight's drawing. Our winner is Myra Davis. Let's congratulate Myra in the comments, and Myra will be contacting you so we can be able to send you your book. And remember, to enter into this drawing, you need to register at unchainedevent.org/Bryant/register. You will get a daily email or text message with a link before the program. Click on that link and you'll be entered into that evening's giveaway. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been richly blessed with this evening's message by Pete O'Connor's testimony. Don't forget to join us tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Central Time when we will look at our next breakthrough in living an unchained life. We will also be joined by Jason Rooks. He will share with us some of his story and how he has broken free from the chains that once held him back. Have a good evening and God bless.